morning. I'm Steelfur. Welcome to Steelfur Speaks. You know when you're in bed and you wake up like half an hour early, an hour early, and you're like, okay, cool. I want to go back to sleep because I can, sleep in a bit longer if I want to. But you're like, well, I'll just check my phone. I'll just distract myself for 10 minutes and then I'll go back to sleep. And then you read something and you're like, yeah, sleep is tricky. So it's almost 7 a.m. Good morning. Obviously every content creator is going to be making something about this latest news. I mean, we can't not in this sort of situation. But I do have some very, I would say, interesting and potentially strong words to say about the new ban and what that kind of tells us about, we'll say, processes at LSS not being what I would really like them to be in a certain sense. Okay. And let's explain that a bit further. So, of course, the news, let's get the page up here, is that we have, where's the best place for my face? Let's put myself in sense. We have a new banned and restricted list announcement. Over the course of the Road to Nationals season, reaffirmed by the results of the Calling Las Vegas, Chain Bound by Shadow has clearly emerged as the best performing hero in Classic Constructed. As demonstrated by Tyler Horsepool, who won the Calling Las Vegas with his innovative Prism control deck, Chain can be beaten, and in fact, Tyler beat Chain 7 times on his way to lifting the winner's trophy. Saying that, we believe Chain's current power level, because he was over 50% or 40% of the field, is oppressive to the viability of other decks, and to be frank, has consistent play patterns that are proving to unfun to play against and spectate, which is true. When 45% of your meta shows up playing one deck, you know that hero is definitely overbalanced or essentially overtuned to a certain extent. And the fact that Tyler could win with his control deck basically meant that Chain was also completely dominant in the format, because Tyler basically teched entirely against Chain and then only played Chains and therefore won the tournament. The solution to this is that we believe removing Seeds of Agony from the Classic Constructed format will be positive for the tournament experience while not eliminating Chain's viability as a player in the metagame. We'll talk about that in a second. Chain will have to work harder to enable his current game plan, allowing other aggressive decks to compete, which we believe provides a more positive game experience. Unhallowed Rites is another card we are also closely watching. The ability to recur Howl from Beyond multiple times over the course of a game is an engine that allows Chain to repeatedly output damage above the normal cost matrix. Unhallowed Rites is also on the Classic Constructed watch list, so it's good that they have a watch list they're telling us about. The last Blitz season was a Skirmish Season 2 that ran soon after the release of Monarch. During that season, Chain was the second best performing hero. It was a period of time when Chain was new, and the best build of the deck was still being refined by new players around the world. Since then, players have mastered Chain and refined the deck. With Skirmish Season 3 starting in November, that's very good news, and it is likely to be Blitz, though I expect we will see some elements of Tails Sealed mixed in, with certain stores being given the right to run Tails Sealed. Just based on the distributor allowances that we have in the UK, it is highly likely that a decent percentage of product has been reserved at distributors for a sealed Skirmish season in November, which will be quite interesting. And of course, that gets Nationals out of the way, which will be Classic Constructed practice. So of course, we will have a Blitz/sealed Skirmish season in November, which will be very good to look forward to. The Seeds of Agony is banned in Classic Constructed. So let's just talk about this briefly before we move on. I wanna let's read this bit first, and then we can talk about what we think about this ban. So, why now? Tales of Aria might fix it, and this is true. A lot of people look to a new set release to try and balance the meta before expecting their developers to jump in with a fix. So James has said, yes, we expect the ice mechanics feature in Tales of Aria to be effective at combating Chain's primary game plan by slowing him down. True. We also expect Chain to remain a big part of the metagame despite this. We'll see. As it stands, we feel that there is a risk that the metagame could become very narrow for the National Championship season beginning October 23rd, and the best decision is to act now. We want to give players as much time as possible to prepare for National Championships, and we believe it would be completely unreasonable to ban a card midway through the National Championship season. Absolutely correct. We feel the options are to act now or not until National Championships season is concluded. We're choosing to act now. This is 100% correct, by the way. If you think that there is an issue with the meta, and from your own internal testing, you don't see the new set as fixing it, banning it as quickly as possible before the national championship season starts is 100% the right decision, right? Because now we actually have over a month and like 2 weeks to test decks without chain. Now that's not a long amount of time, but given that we've just gotten Aria, everyone who is serious about competing at national championships is testing the new Aria heroes, building gauntlets of, the good heroes from previous sets, and basically smashing them together over and over again. So there's going to be hundreds of games played between now and the national season by people who are serious competitors in their testing teams, and that that is the process myself I'm taking with my group that I play with. We are testing the new heroes. We're trying to find that one deck that makes Briar work, that makes Oldhim work, and then we're smashing them against the demon decks from the previous meta, and that means we have enough time now to test this change and to see how the game feels without it. How did this seed grow to become the monster that it is? During the development of Monarch, we were planning for a significant season of limited format calling events, which they're going to have, and a mid-year national championships featuring Monarch booster draft, which is interesting. So no plans for Tales of Aria national championships. That's interesting. But also the question being, did they plan to be booster draft only or to be constructed in booster draft? And this is a big question. The prolonged status of COVID wrecked these plans, obviously, with Monarch limited calling events that were scheduled for Taipei, Singapore, Melbourne all cancelled, and the US calling being pushed back to begin with Tales of Aria. National Championships was pushed back. So we knew this had happened. We knew, just looking at the data, and when national championships had been scheduled, they never planned for national championships to come when they did. Otherwise, there's no way, if your schedule is going according to plan, that your national championships happens before the unlimited edition of a set comes out. It's just not something that you'd expect or plan for. We're already going to see problems, and I'll do a video about this later on, about the scarcity of things like legendaries and stuff like that to build, say, Oldhim or Briar for the national championships, because the only cards that are available to you, especially if you're in the UK, because we don't expect to see Tales Unlimited until at least late November, is you're going to be playing with at least 3 cold foils to get that deck working, and you also have to source those cold foils and also keep them safe and not have them taken or lost or anything like that, or scuffed or damaged. So there's already a big pressure on Tales of Aria first edition to provide those cards, but also to get those cards into the hands of people, and this change will shift that, because I know a lot of people were going to happily just play Chain again because he was going to be strong as well. So it's a knock-on effects of this. The lesson learned for us was we put too much focus on balancing Chain for Monarch booster draft during development, as the cost of Classic Constructed in particular. We knew and wanted Chain to be a top-performing deck in constructed formats. He is the face of Shadow at this point in time, a key figure in the Monarch story arc, and a villain every good story needs. Considerations for changes, such as Chain having 3 intellect, less than 20 or 40 health, no arsenal, variations to his activated ability, and the costing of some of his cards were all considered. In hindsight, the mistake was reducing the cost of both Seeds of Agony and Riftbind during booster draft development to enable these 2 commons to form the core of primary Chain archetype. That's interesting. So the revelation here is that Seeds of Agony previously cost 1, and Riftbind previously cost 2. So they would have been your combo. You'd have played 1 Seeds of Agony into a Riftbind. Instead, they made Seeds of Agony free. And I think we can all agree, or at least I personally feel, that making Seeds of Agony free definitely was a mistake in that environment. So, was making Seeds of Agony free a mistake? Yes, it that card should never have been free. It costs. It's worthy of being at least 1. And I would argue, if you look at Bramblespark now and Tales of Aria, which seems to have been costed based on the same principle as Seeds, it could have cost 1 as well. I will say, though, about Bramblespark, obviously you're not getting to play 5 of them in 1 turn. So that is a little bit of a different balance curve than Seeds of Agony. But of course, Seeds of Agony being free and the ability to play all 6 or 7 or 8 of them in 1 turn is a big threat. Why ban cards when they're Living Legend? I think this is fairly obvious, but we'll read through it anyway. The purpose of Living Legend isn't to act so only as a safety value to purge overpowered decks. It's primarily served as a role of honor to recognize excellence over the history of the game and to refresh the metagame. To that end, we don't view Living Legend as being something that will eventually clean up the mess. Without Seeds of Agony, we expect Chain to continue his march towards Living Legend status. We believe without Seeds of Agony, this can happen in a more positive way. Now, I'm just going to scroll up because I'm giving away some spoilers. So, okay. So the last bit is definitely correct. Living Legend is a slow process, and you cannot rely on Living Legend to balance the game if it's going to take 6 months of tournaments to get a hero removed from the format, right? And I've kind of been saying this all along. You know, the people who said Chain is too powerful, but Living Legend will fix it, that's not really what you want to hear. Like, oh, Chain is just going to dominate the Monarch and Tales of Aria metas for 6 months, and then he's going to get Living Legended, and then the problem's going to be solved. That's not really what you want from a developer. I want my developer to be like, that hero is tuned a bit too much. We're going to change this card. We're going to remove this card. See if he's more balanced with the format then. See what works and see what doesn't work. Personally, I really think the idea of removing Chain's arsenal probably actually would have made the hero a lot more balanced. I feel like the fact that he can play a 5-card hand and also get a lot of cards from his banish zone is huge. I would have really liked to see Chain without an arsenal and see how that played. I think that might have created a lot of different strategies because you couldn't rely on stuff like Plunder Run and things like that. You would have had to rely on just your banish cards and your hand, and that would have created a much more restrictive style of gameplay. But I think it would have caused Chain to be a lot more balanced in the format. So notes on Seeds of Agony itself. Obviously, costing 1, this would have been a completely different kettle of fish, but they have chosen not to errata the card. They have chosen to ban the card. I do really think that this actually puts a lot more pressure on Chain than a lot of people realize. The important thing to understand about Chain, of course, is that while you're playing Shadow Puppetry and Moravian Skies, those are not non-attack actions that can be played from the banished zone. There are actually now, in fact, only 3 non-attack actions that can be played from the banished zone. One being Tome of Torment that does not have Go Again, but draws you a card. The other one being Seeping Shadows, which costs 3 and is therefore very hard to play in some matchups. And then, of course, Howl from Beyond, which costs 2, and again, is also quite expensive and hard to play in some matchups. This ban will actually make it a lot harder to enable things like Riftbind, obviously, but also things like Bounding Demigon, which requires you to have played a non-attack action in order to play it from Banish, and Unhallowed Rites, which requires the same. Unhallowed Rites, obviously, will now mostly be used to recur Howl from Beyond, since Seeds of Agony is no longer the target, and that is commonly what people targeted with it. So Unhallowed Rites might see a bit less play in the Chain deck, given that you can't recur Seeds anymore. You might, however, still run some, as it's a 1 for 4 that recurs your Howl from Beyond, which is still quite a good thing to do. This is a huge change. I'll be honest, since I've just woken up, I have no idea exactly how this is going to impact the meta, which I know isn't great for the first episode of what we're calling the Steelfur Supremacy Classic Constructed and Constructed format discussions. But I feel like that is, it's too early to say exactly what this will do to Chain. I think it will have a very, very huge impact on him as a class. I really think that, I really think maybe we could have put this as restricted first. So you could only run 1 of each, just to still give Chain some density of non-attack actions that can be played from Banish. I do wonder if that means we're going to see a replacement for this in a later set. Maybe if there is that supplemental set that people have speculated about, we might actually be seeing something else come in then. But clearly this was seen as a problem that needed to be tackled directly before Nationals. And I think Seeds has proven itself to be that power card in Chain. It's definitely, if I wanted to put Chain back a decent step, I would definitely have gotten rid of Seeds. I think it is just that card that turns on and enables so many other things. But it does knock on and cause a lot of knock-on effects to things that you had as being more reliable in your deck, like Consuming Volition and Meet and Greet. You're generating a lot less Arcane without Seeds of Agony, and therefore you may have to put stuff like Vexing Malice in, give it Go Again in order to play a Meet and Greet, etc., etc. You will have to consider other deck-building options in order to make that successful. Okay? I think we're all going to be considering those other options. Now we move on to a much more surprising, but I wouldn't say unexpected based on testing. I have seen decks that can keep 10 counters for the entire game. Once they start getting them, they don't lose them. Chain every single turn, counter, counter, counter. Suddenly he has 10 counters. And you're playing a control deck, you thought I can control Chain, but then suddenly he's not just coming in for his basic attacks, he's also just adding 10 on the end. You can't deal with that. No one can deal with that. No one can block that much, right? Now, this is funny because I have a video coming out this evening where I talk about the fact. So let's read this. So Duskblade, right? Brand new card, hasn't even come out yet. Some people have some. My friend Jason just opened one cold foil in the pre-release. I know he's going to be very upset about that, but I think this is the right decision. So start off, they're being very honest. We made a mistake. This is great. Designers need to accept ego and understand when they made a mistake. But there are some disturbing warning signs, we'll say in here, for the development of the set, right? So this card was added late. So we made a mistake. This card was added late to the Tales of Aria in development. It is not part of the core elemental theme of the set, which of course everyone can see. For its flavor, it was a callback to Monarch's Light versus Shadow, being the demonstrator's counterpart to the other iconic weapon of Wraith, Solana's Dawnblade. So a lot of people commented on this. I mean, everyone saw that this was the case. Everyone knew. Basically, looking at this, they were like, "How is this Briar's majestic weapon? It doesn't really make any sense." And I think there was a lot of community feedback in terms of why is this in this set? It looks like it should have been in Monarch. And I think a lot of comments, and certainly if you watch my video later on about the design decisions for this set, a lot of those Runeblade cards, like we've seen with this, do just look like they weren't designed with Tales of Aria in mind. They were designed with Monarch in mind, and there just wasn't space in that set for them. So they were added here for some reason, which of course is not a good way to design a Class B based game where you want people to get excited for all of the cards coming out for a new class and a new class that's coming with a different theme. It's not really good to include cards in that set that then jar people out of that immersion. And I think we're seeing an acknowledgement of that as a mistake that the design team has made. But the next bit is probably the most worrying part, right? Unfortunately, Duskblade was not subjected to the classic constructed testing process it should have been. Particularly being a weapon that starts in play and influences every turn of the game, Duskblade invalidates control strategies in classic constructed, where over the course of a long game it reliably accumulates upwards of 10 counters. We believe that Duskblade can find its own place in Blitz, as the nature of the format leads to shorter games due to the presence of top-performing aggressive and combo decks such as Ira, Dorinthia, and Kano. We were watching results closely as Duskblade is on the Blitz watch list. We apologize and feel embarrassed for this mistake and are taking learnings from it to better improve our development process. The upcoming National Championship season, running in 25 countries around the world, is shaping up to be an incredible tournament season. We are taking preemptive action in the interest of supporting a healthy and enjoyable National Championship season by removing Duskblade from Classic Control. So let's first address just the honesty. This is the best thing you can see from a design team of a game, especially a new game. It's humility. It's being like, okay, cool, that's wrong, and fixing it. It's responsiveness. It's reactiveness. Like, a lot of companies will be like so against the idea of banning cards or removing cards before they come out. They will allow the game to be unhealthy and unbalanced just because they don't want to admit their own mistakes, right? Let's just get that out of the way. To come up and just say, we screwed up, this needs to go now, is very, very good to see from a design team, right? Especially before it breaks a tournament. Like, they could have easily have done this after one Nationals when they saw it broke a tournament. They'll be like, oh, wow, that's a lot more powerful than we thought. Let's ban it. But actually, they're just admitting now that they're watching the testing that everyone's doing, and they're saying, oh, God, yeah, no, that doesn't, no. All right, get it gone. And that is actually a very good thing to see from a design team. And you can't, I don't want to underplay that. Because a lot of games, especially new games, do have the ego factor of the design where they are really happy with everything they're doing and they have favorite cards they've been working on for years and they really are afraid to kill their darlings, essentially. And it is very good that at this point, even before the card has become legal, they're stepping in and saying no. However, I will say that this line is worrying. Right, from someone who has played many games and been part of quite a few design processes, this is very worrying. So what this tells me is a few things. So let's just break this down. So firstly, we have the classic constructed testing process, okay, which is assumedly reasonably robust. And I have a feeling that they made Rosetta Thorn for Briar, the classic constructed testing, and that was the weapon for Briar. And I have a feeling that design teams struggled to figure out another weapon that would suit Briar's strategy. Okay? let's just throw that idea out there. So say that's the case. So they struggled to figure out another weapon that would suit Briar's strategy. Okay, and I do agree that that's kind of difficult because how do you give Briar a weapon? No, do you know what? Actually, do you know what? I would have given Briar a weapon that had two fuse effects, one that fused for Earth and one that fused for Lightning, and I would have had you be able to fuse your weapon with that power, which is something that Briar should definitely be able to do as an elemental runeblade. And I would have had her Majestic be some 1-for-3 sword that fuses with lightning to get go again, or do fuses with lightning to do 1 arcane damage, and fuses with Earth to get +1 or +2. I would have done it that way, probably. But I'm just throwing out ideas. Obviously, I'm obviously not one of the designers for this game. There's obviously lots of reasons why that design probably wouldn't work, just in terms of gameplay plans. But my point is that either the designs they had for Briar just weren't getting tweaked right. So that can happen. You do your first design document, you go through playtesting, you keep iterating on the Majestic weapon for Briar, and it just never gets to the point that it's working, and you have to get rid of it and replace it with something else. And that can happen late in the testing process, right? And when that happens, you have two choices. You either fill the slot with something else, or you put in something cool in its place, right? And clearly at that situation, when whatever they were testing for the slot before they came up with Duskblade didn't work, they had to put something else in. And they came up with Duskblade and they put Duskblade in. So they were like, oh, this is going to be cool. I mean, because it is cool. It is cool to have Dawnblade and Duskblade. It is cool to have Light and Shadow. I think Duskblade would have been like better as a theme if it had replaced Dread Scythe in the set. But thematically and powerfully, I think Duskblade is a bit of a misstep. And we can kind of see this. So Duskblade gets added in late. People don't have enough time to test it because the print run has to happen. So it goes out to print, right? That's kind of it. Right? And basically, that's kind of how it happens. Okay? Because in practice, a card getting added that late that it doesn't have time to be accurately tested really just happens one of two ways. And we have to kind of ask ourselves which way is happening here. So either through the process that I've just explained, a card doesn't really work, it never really finishes the testing process, and you have to find a replacement for it last minute to get something into the set, because you can't not fill that slot in the set. That doesn't make sense. People will be complaining the set's smaller than the last one. Or something else happens. Let's just talk a little bit about that. And obviously, without a window into internal politics, James White, we can't really comment, and I hope it isn't this way. But the other thing that can happen, of course, which is just something to be aware of. I'm not saying it happened here. I want to reiterate that because I think this is a very positive thing for LSS to be doing. I'm really happy to wake up and see this. So I don't really want people to feel like this is a super negative video, as I think this is actually a positive thing to admit and a positive thing for the game. And it is important that these changes are made actively and proactively before cards ruin tournament seasons like Duskblade was going to, right? But there is another way that can happen, right? And that is developer has good idea in the lead up to the set finalizing the testing process. Really, really, really likes the idea, puts the idea in the set, despite the fact that it doesn't have the time to be tested. And then, of course, the set goes live with that card, despite the team not, having tested it. Now, I obviously, have signed NDAs for previous games that I have tested, but I can say in the abstract and objective with a bit of distance that has definitely happened and will continue to happen in gaming. And also to say that it's not always a bad thing. Like sometimes, and people who have worked on creative projects will understand this. Sometimes that last minute flash of insight you get as to like where all the pieces line up together in your mind and you know exactly what your project needs to just like affect it. Sometimes those are really good. Like sometimes they are perfection. They just completely hit, if you can hear that, that's my alarm going off. Good morning. They can just completely hit just what you need to make your creative project like shine. But you do also have to be very wary of them because obviously they don't have time to get reviewed properly. They have the maximum potential to be a misstep because no one else is overseeing them to the level that they need to, right? They are the well, they are this, essentially. They are this is an amazing idea, it's really synergistic, it works really well, but it wasn't tested, so no one can tell you that it doesn't work, that it works too well, right? And the thing is, it's not to say that they're not saying here that Duskblade wasn't tested, but it wasn't tested for Classic Constructed, which kind of implies that it was mixed into the draft pool and people were having fun with it in draft, but it wasn't really tested from the Classic Constructed perspective. So those are the two ways that can often happen. I mean, if you can think of any other ways that happens. And it is just worth being aware of the signs that could potentially point to. I think we've seen James White talk. I think he's a very intelligent and engaged person. But when people are creating, they do, of course, get quite passionate about their ideas. And, of course, sure, there are other designers at LSS that are responsible for coming up with card games. And it is just worth being aware that there might have been a bit of a situation here where someone thought they had the perfect solution, and of course it just turned out to not be the case, but because it was created so late during the process, it didn't get robustly tested, and that can happen. And the thing is, like, when I say these are the ways this could happen and it is a worrying sign, it is a worrying sign, right? Because essentially you have designers overriding the testing process in favor of getting a new card in, right? But if there needed to be a card in that slot, someone was going to have to design something. And the fact is that is also just part of the process of making the game. You do just have to come up with a card that fits in and hope that it works. So I'm not really, like, to kind of bring this back up to where I want it to be now that we've put in, a bit of analysis into how these things work and what kind of goes on there. Just let me turn this off so it doesn't come back on again. It is worth noting and understanding that, like, that happens. This is the best possible response, right? That's where I want to get us back to, right? Everything I've just said, that happens. Designers get ideas and want them added to the set. Cards don't work out in testing, and you need to design a replacement quickly. Mistakes get made and things don't get tested properly. All of these things happen, right? The difference is how you deal with them after the fact that they've happened, right? No card games goes through without a testing or without a misstep on the practice and the design floor, right? It never happens, okay? But remember what we talked about before we started talking about this. Some games, some designers let ego get in the way. They wait to just be proved absolutely wrong, right? Because they know that the card is too powerful. They know what testing is saying. They know what pro players testing is saying before the event. But because it's their card, they really want to give someone a chance to, like, come in and beat it with something that they haven't even imagined from the meta, and that the meta magically balances itself, right? But that does happen sometimes, but it doesn't happen all the time, and you can't rely on it. The best response when you see a misstep like this is for those people, that card to get addressed before it becomes legal, before it starts dominating a tournament scene. That is literally the best response you can get. That's why this is good. That's why this whole article is good. This whole article is admitting that, right, it's just admitting that people are human and mistakes get made, and that you need to tune a game that's active, right? If you look at any modern game that's digital, they get patch updates, they get cards changed, they get erratas all the time. The fact is, you cannot make a product and then send it to, 200,000 people and then expect them not to find bugs in the product you've made. And that is as true for physical card games as it ever has been for computer code and digital things and board games, etc., etc. That's why the comprehensive rules is always being updated, and that is why this card is getting banned and other cards will get banned in the future. It is shitty. Like, it is shitty. I am opening boxes of Tales this weekend. My friend opened a cold foil Duskblade at the pre-release over the weekend. It is shitty that card is going to be making its way into a lot of people's hands, and it cannot be played in Classic Constructed at Nationals. If you are opening boxes with the hope of getting cold foils for Nationals so you can build the heroes you want, yeah, it's great. You don't need a Duskblade anymore. However, you also don't need a Duskblade anymore. So if you open one, you're going to feel a bit bad about it. It is worth noting that there is no mention that either of these cards is going to be removed from print. So I think we'll have to see what's happening there. I think they may be leaving it in the hope that at some point in the future they can unban them. But of course, we will have to see when Tales Unlimited comes out if Duskblade is included. Obviously, if it is included, that's a good sign that they feel like Duskblade might be playable at some point in the future. Maybe when Chain has received his Living Legend status, and we have other Rune Blades that could potentially benefit from playing Duskblade. But of course, if it is removed from Tales of Aria Unlimited, just like Drone of Brutality, we can expect to not see this card coming back. However, I will say that Drone of Brutality was banned for specific reasons it broke a basic gameplay formula, whereas these are being banned for power reasons. So my current prediction is that these will not be banned. These will not be removed from the print run. They will be kept in the print run so that they can be available to people at a later date if it is decided that they are not broken, basically, because heroes have made Living Legend or because things have changed and statuses have changed. Right. So the next banned and restricted list is on December 14th. I think that's going to be very exciting. I think this was very exciting. Just to reiterate what I've said before, this is great. Good to see responsiveness. However, obviously, the realities of testing are what they are, but we would really, really like to see cards not coming in that haven't been tested for the classic constructed environment. This is their biggest environment as far as I'm concerned. I do view Flesh and Blood as a good draft set, and it is very fun as a drafting game. But classic constructed is where I want the game to be the best, because I need it to not have variance, and I need it to not variance, but I need to be able to build a good deck and have the format be balanced and be able to play games and games and games and iterate decks, and that's really part of the process for me in terms of enjoying a card game. So if Classic Constructed isn't balanced, in my mind, it doesn't matter how good draft is, it doesn't matter if sealed is okay, it really just, you have to go again. Right, okay. That's where I'm going to leave it. Obviously, I have to put a note now upon the video that I'm releasing this evening, basically because not a lot of this, I mean, we'll say the first 2 or 3 minutes are addressing this line, this bit, and how that feels to people, as well as how powerful Chain is and how it feels to people get more support for him. But once we get through that, we do dive into a really good discussion of Aria mechanically, how it feels, how we feel it competes with older sets and things like that, which I think you're all going to find fun. This is just an early morning bonus video based on the news that's happened. Obviously, this had to happen, and I'm quite excited that it has happened. I do feel like I was expecting to see 40 to 50% Chain at the national tournament in the national season. I do feel like getting rid of seeds will effectively change that markup. I am now really excited to see whether the new Tails heroes can find a better position in a post-seeds, no Duskblade Chain environment. We're going to really see, I think, Prism come back in as well. And this kind of concludes the first end of Steelfur Supremacy, which is, of course, my new constructed format of discussions where I just do videos that are about deck text, rules changes, constructive strategy, and that will be forming a new playlist on my channel where all of those videos are going to go. So if you want to watch specifically just constructed only content, you can just put on that playlist and see what my latest video is about the classic constructed or the tournament scene, basically. So I might talk about draft in there as well, but it's mostly going to be tournament focused videos. Okay, thanks a lot, everyone. Have a good day. I'm certainly going to have a good day. I'm going to go and get some toast, and I'm going to go to work and go to the office. Yeah, sounds fun. All right, thanks a lot, everyone, of course. And if you are still listening, please do remember to like and subscribe to this video, because if you can listen to me for 34 minutes, then you should come back tomorrow and we can do this again.